Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, we are delighted to continue the series with Aisling Lalor, who is the founder of Aisling Lalor Dental Skin. And the first episode, we really talked about, the business component, what some of the struggles are, running a business as a female founder. Also, really our purpose and how we can fuel our purpose through extracurricular activities, through courses, through learning. But we're going to talk about now through adventure. So when we're having fun, when we're putting ourselves in challenging situations, such as marathon running, such as skydiving, things that some of you might hear and say, I'll never do that. And it doesn't have to be to that extreme, but how can you put yourself in and just say yes to these situations that at the time might scare you, but that there's learning, there's letting go, and there's some freedom to explore and find out, what you're truly made out of, what's fun for you, and just to come out the other end a different person, have a different experience, a different perspective. And when you do that, you bring it back to your everyday life, whether it's, you're running a business, you're supporting a team, and it makes such a difference. So I'm delighted to dive into part 2 with Aisling, who's just going to share, the preparation for a marathon, what went on in her head. I'm sure there's some mindset tricks that go through your mind, but also on the other end, what was she able to do? What was that feeling of, I can do anything? And that spills out into, your everyday life when you're having a difficult conversation, when you're backed into a corner and you think, I can't do this. But then you remember, those training days and what I did in, some of my adventurous activities, and you're like, no, I got this. I'm going to go forward. So tune into part 2 with Aisling Lalor. Buckle your seatbelts. This is a fun and enjoyable ride. I hope you take some of her inspiration away. I know I will, and really inject some fun and excitement and some levity back into sales, because it should be excitement. It's a great profession, and we can have a lot of fun. All right, everyone, enjoy, and thanks for watching. From what you've shared so far, you have a great academic background. There's a creative lens that's allowed you to build a practice in 2018 and really, find success. But it seems like you have a real fun factor, an adventurous factor built in. And, why don't you talk to us a little bit about some of the major milestones? Like you mentioned the Marathon Des Sables. Like, tell us what that is, and what did you learn about yourself from going through such a physical? And I imagine, like, what's the thing they say, when the legs fail, the mind prevails. Because I think in those kind of situations, it's not that my body can't go; it's my head that's talking to me. The gremlins have come in. So talk to us about how you thought about doing something like that. And what did you learn about yourself in the process that you brought into both your personal and professional life?
Yes, so the Marathon des Sables, I remember doing a 50K hike for the chest, heart, and stroke. And on that journey, I got talking to this guy, a really cute guy. And anyway, he was talking about all his challenges and how he had done the Costa Rican marathon. And he said that one of his big things, everyone talks about the Marathon des Sables, but we said maybe someday I'll do it. So only a couple of weeks later, and of course you're scrolling on social media, and the Marathon des Sables kept coming up. I said, why does it keep coming up on my feed? And it was out of intrigue. I sort of checked it out. And then work was really busy, and there are different things that I suppose I didn't really understand. And then there was this one particular week, and I'm like, God, I don't really understand this. But you know what? I need something really big to focus on. Next minute, Marathon Des Sables came up on my social media feed. And what did I do? I sort of went in and then checked it all out. And then there was a deposit. So I thought, you know what? I'll pay the deposit, see what happens. So of course, anyway, I had been working with a PT, and I've been doing a good bit of work with him for a couple of years because I had some numbness in my hand, but it was coming from a trapped nerve. And by working on my strength, I was able to resolve all of that. So I went and I spoke to him. I said, Alan, guess what I've done? And he said, you did what? You're banned from social media. And then I thought, God, I've really done something wrong here. So I went back to have a look to see if I could actually get my deposit back, but you couldn't get your deposit back unless you had COVID and you couldn't go to do the race. So then I just thought, okay, I'm committed. I may get stuck in. So Alan and I myself, we then researched and in regards about the Marathon des Sables, and we researched trainers. So then I started working with Rory Coleman, who actually finished his 16th Marathon des Sables April just passed. And I started working with him, and it was the craziest, most incredible journey I've done in my life. The training, you were up early in the morning, sometimes you were late at night. I had to train to run in heat, so I had to train in an acclimation chamber for a couple of sessions so that my body could get used to the humidity. The distance that you had to run. There was a time when I actually did sort out life assurance, which I didn't have before that, and I even had a will, and I all these things. You become incredibly organized. Meeting some of the people who were running, and then planning for the race itself, because they had some race rules. So one of them was you had to have a certain number of calories every day. Your bag could be between two certain weights, and my coach said, right, I want your bag 6.5 kgs, that's it, and you've got to weigh 56 kgs. That's it. When you're on the sand, the lighter you are, the less water you're going to need, so you're going to have to you'll cope better. And the people that I met along that journey, that I don't think I would have met if I hadn't done it. And then also I was raising money for a charity called Chill in Carrickfergus, that deal with people who do families and people who contemplate suicide. And because two members of my team had family members who had committed suicide, and so it was sort of like a rounding of the circle and doing all of this, and meeting these people, getting involved. And the whole community were behind me. It was brilliant. From that point of view, it's they would they would they would come into the surgery. Oh, I saw you out running the other day. Was that you in that crazy jacket? Were you running with all those layers? And then I put on social media, and they're like, What sort of chamber were you running in?" And even after the race, they told me about how they had watched me running the race. So it was just fantastic. Um, it was really hard. There were times where there was one particular day where I decided I was going to run 35 miles, and I hadn't really told my parents what I was doing, because they were always would just have thought I was, well, they did think I was crazy anyway, but probably would have been, I think I probably protected them, but protected myself, because I couldn't deal with sort of potentially if there's negativity. But on this particular day, this is how they found out. So my children were with my parents, and I embarked on this run. I got a train because I knew I couldn't do a loop, so I had to go a certain distance away, and I had to run all the way back. So the mistakes I learned on that day, one was hydration and the hydration tablets, because they were in a little, like the effervescent tablets you get, and they're in a long tube. And because I had been running all that distance, the tablets had all become like powder. So I didn't really know how much I was putting into my water. And I went into, I was running, I'm probably hopping between different things, but I was in about 15 miles into my run, and it started to get dark, and I was beginning to run out of water. And I saw this little pub, which was just on the side of the canal, beside a humpback bridge, and I had some money in my bag, so thankfully I'd been a bit organized. Because I was low on the water, I thought, right, I'm not going to see another bar for a while, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get some waters because most of the shops had closed at this point of the evening. So I went in and ordered the water, and I was in my running gear. It was really windy outside. People were in there having their dinner. I was like, what is this crazy girl doing in running gear? And I'd even forgotten my torch, so I was running by moonlight. So it was actually the reflection on the water, and that's how I was running along. All sounds crazy, but I'd say it was one of the most amazing days. So I popped the lid on my effervescent tablets, and this puff of white powder came out. So not only did I see this crazy lady, I thought, God, she's definitely on something. Um, and it was just one of those simple things, because if I hadn't learned that on that day, I wouldn't have known how to protect the tablets when I got out onto the desert, to make sure that where it was important to keep myself really hydrated. So yeah, they're just, even out at the race and staying in a tent and you with seven strangers, we became like a family towards the end of the week. And we were all, two of them were very competitive, two of them were from an army background. Another lady was from a financial background, and she had the heaviest bag, I think, of the whole camp, because she was into her healthy eating. So I think her bag was about 12 kgs or something like that, where we were all in around seven. And it was just all of us looking out for each other, and survive in the desert.
And so, Ashling, it's 6 days and a marathon a day. Is that what it is?
Yes, so it's actually over. So on most of the days, it's nearly the distance of a marathon. Some days might be slightly over, and some days less, depending on the course. And on one of the days is a double distance, 53 miles. And you had 35 hours in which to complete it. So every day you had a certain number of hours to complete that race on that day. If you didn't make it, then it meant that you couldn't go on to the next day. And so the 35-hour day, it was interesting, because some people would do the distance of a marathon, then sleep in their sleeping bag in the tent, because you were carrying your own sleeping bag and your own clothes and food the whole time. The only thing you were given was water. And then the camp organizers, they would move the tents from one place to the next, which is just literally a rug and a Bedouin top, which is made out of horsehair, that's over the top of you. And literally, it was held up by 5 sticks. So we became the best tent engineers by the end of the week as well. It just all sounds really, really crazy. And just even on that long day, the support, because the everybody was exhausted, but we all came out to watch the last person coming home, and they just made it ahead of the 35 hours so that they could get into the following day. So they must have been exhausted, didn't have much rest before the final race day.
Wow. I mean, I'm leaning in, I'm leaning out, I'm leaning in, I'm leaning out.
Yeah.
It's, I would imagine some people think, well, you just signed yourself up for torture. But as you were sharing, and I just thought so many things about, the charity you did it for, and you mentioned this, but coming full circle, it sounded like you had a guiding force from there's something bigger than you looking over you from that training run and just giving you those preparatory tools that helped you on the race day. And even just the belief and the resiliency within yourself, knowing that, like, if I don't make, like, you could get disqualified at every time, so there's that real inner strength. It's like, I got this far, like, no one's pushing me out. So what what did you think about, like, it's kind of like you have all that time, and I know I've run marathons, but after one, like, I don't do another one. i, I fall over. But, like, what were the thoughts going on in your head? I imagine there was some, doubtful stuff and then positive stuff, but just talk to us a little bit about what you were thinking about in those times.
Well, when I was out, um, when I was training at home, I probably would listen to a whole load of podcasts. And that in itself was a self-development. Because I think I think more recently I've thought about the Marathon des Sables, and it was, I think I've like mined the gap. Um, and because I did a business course recently, and one of the things you had to develop was a growth action plan. And I realized, gosh, that was all about that. It was like mind that growth action plan. It can be in business or personal. And the Marathon des Sables was all of that. And then there were days when I just trained in silence because I just thought when I was out there, I didn't know if I was going to have Wi-Fi, if the phone was going to fail me, different things like that. So when I was out in the Marathon des Sables, I had trained myself to think of scenarios. So I would think of scenarios and I would play the scenarios out. And then I would think of different outcomes and what would be the good and what would be the bad. So I'd sort of play mental games with myself. Other times you were chatting with some of the other runners. And we were talking about earlier on where you'd start off and then you'd maybe racing ahead of somebody. And then, a couple of miles in, you were beginning to sort of flag a bit. And then they would come racing past you, like, oh, hold on a second. And then you try and catch up with them and, you'd have the chat. So there's a little bit of, I suppose if you go to out to the Marathon des Sables, there is a little bit of a competitive streak there as well, and in some people big competitive streaks. And so you had that where you had that little bit of fun. Um, and then I would set up small challenges. So sometimes I was going over sort of big sandy jebbles, sometimes smaller ones. And because the sand was so soft, and other times it was hard, but in the soft sand, I'll play games with myself to go, right, okay, how are you going to climb this now, Aisling? Are you gonna walk like a duck up, or are you gonna sidewalk, or are you just gonna go for it? So you were always playing some mental games with yourself to keep yourself going. And especially there are times when you were running on your own, because people were either ahead of you or behind you, or sometimes you were walking, and it just depended on the course on that particular day. And then sometimes you would stop and go, "What am I doing?" But I think you always knew, well, look, I have to get to the end here. I have to get to the finish line because I want to get home. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Get back to camp. And then when you're at home in the camp, you had the crack with your teammates and all the other competitors as well. It was very humbling, really, really humbling. There was an 81-year-old from South Africa running. There were two 16-year-olds. There was one gentleman who ran it in barefoot the whole race. Then there were lots of army guys who were running for the walking wounded, and one of them was running in an army vest that weighed 10 kgs on its own. So I would meet them we called it dock trotters, because obviously running in the heat, your feet would swell, probably both. um, and running that sort of mileage, so blisters was just part and parcel of it all. So most evenings I ended up going down to dock trotters, and it was like going to your local. So the first time when I went, they basically said, "Well, look, do you think you could pop this blister yourself?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it should be fine." So you're all sitting in this tent, sitting on the floor with just rugs. You're having a bit of a chat, and the nurses come over. They give you the needle. They give you the iodine. You clean the wound, and then you basically go out with a plastic bag over your foot, and then a makeshift slipper, to get back so that you didn't get any sand into the wound. And then one of the days I went in and it was quite a bad one. They said, "Oh, I don't think you can pop that yourself. You're going to have to go and see the doctor." So you go into this waiting area, and all the army guys were there, and you were sitting. And then, you had to disinfect your feet and the crack. And the army guys are washing themselves with the disinfectant, going, "Here, do this because you're not going to be able to because you couldn't shower yourself properly out there. There weren't all those facilities. And if you had to shower, you had to sort of, there was like a makeshift tent, which was, like the four sides, and there was no roof on it. And if the wind was blowing to the side of it, would whip up. So you always had to, you know, hope that nobody could see you. And but even that, it was the fun, the music, it was just amazing what you put your body through. and then those little small points of communication with other people that just kept you going that whole week. So that was just incredible. It is incredible. And the mind is, you were running, I was running down some of the rocky mountains. When you're going up, it wasn't so bad because it's more in your heels, unless you had a blister in your heels, so your feet were okay, your toes were okay. But when you're down running downhill and you're hitting the rocks, you're like, and then you just keep going. But yeah, it's just incredible, and it's amazing how much the mind will forget. And you just have to take time to think about that and go, gosh, I actually did do that. That did happen. So yeah, mind over body.
Yeah, that's an inspirational story. I still don't think I would do it.
Yeah.
As
That's why
inspiring as
only
it is.
only 22,000 people in the world, I think, have done it.
Oh, really? That's oh, wow, that's unbelievable. And I just wrote down a few words like it shows you what we're capable of, or in your instance, what you are capable of, but all the inspirations you got along the way. So, um, like when you finish something like that and you finish with such an amazing time, every day, like how do you bring that into your job, into your world? Is there's days that you're not motivated, you're not feeling it, and then you relive one of those, god, I remember, at mile whatever and my feet killing, I got through that. And so there's that kind of reflective piece that you bring with you to say, if I got through that, I can get through anything. Does it give you that bit of perseverance, because you've done it in the past?
Oh, absolutely. I think you realize how strong you are. And then, and they talk about resilience in business. And I think when you do need an element of resilience because there is no there is no career or business that has a straight path. They're always going to be, you're going to have your great days, you're going to have your awful days. Some weeks you're going to feel like you're firefighting. And I think, when you know that you've gone through something like that, you just think, you know what, you've done that. And sometimes you might think, God, is this ever going to finish? And then when you think back to that, you go, actually, yes, it is. This is short. This is, and this is not as bad as that. So you know what? Just get stuck in and get it done if you've done it before. And sometimes I think back and I wonder, how did I do, you know, 8, 10, and 12-hour days plus train. And I was on 1,300 calories a day because I had to lose weight before I went out to the desert. And you just think, how did I do that? And I think sometimes you just go like, it obviously was that very focused mindset at that time, and you had a goal. And that's why I quite like to have goals in place because it does focus your mind. And I think for people in business, you're always busy and you've got your goals, but it's good to have a personal goal outside of that, so that the two things can run in tangent, and one will motivate the other, or one will help you overcome a stressful situation in work. So, like we were saying, or you like you're running, is like when you get out there, sometimes a big problem just disappears because you're like, oh my gosh, you've come with a simple way of solving it because you've just decompressed and de-stressed yourself and you've just gone out for a run and you come back just, refreshed, or even be it for a walk or something like that.
I mean, I think that's so important, actually, just for business owners in general, even sales leaders or sales folks, that letting go and just getting out of our heads. And for me, running is a form of meditation because of the breathing. And so when I go out there, I don't have a goal or an agenda usually. It's just I come back and I always have a pen and paper because I have the most creative ideas because I let my brain go. But I remember when I was working in corporate, I had just started sales. And just like you, when you think, how did I do that? And I was training for a marathon and I was actually teaching a marathon clinic. So it was like these crazy days. But in reflection, that's what got me through it. It's because I had purpose. I had something that was bigger than me that was preventing me from flopping on the couch at the end of the day. And so it honestly saved me. But in the time, you don't think that way. But I just think, for those people who can maybe go for a run, go for a walk, and what they realize is the conversations they had earlier in the day, and they perhaps took something personally or they thought they felt attacked. They let it go and they're like, that person just had a bad day. That actually had nothing to do with me. And so I found that very helpful early in my career when I had imposter syndrome and I was, didn't have the confidence I do today, but I remember just replaying them out in a safe place when I was like, releasing through running. I'm like, that had nothing to do with me. And then, oh, that guy's a jerk actually for talking to me. But then it was like I allowed it. So you play it back over in your head and it's a completely different scenario than it was. And I felt like that replaying it allowed me to see things differently, that I didn't always have to wait to go for the run. In the moment, I would catch things. I'm like, I would either seek clarification. Sometimes I'd push back. And so the whole point here is, what can we do to get out of our day to day? Can we go for a walk? How can we reset so that we're not taking, even for you, the fatigue from day one to day two, but have that reset where we can clear the mind and neutralize so that we're always showing up as our best self. We're bringing that ability to have perspective and we're not allowing kind of the last day or the negative day to taint anything in the future.
It's so important. Just having that. And I think people talk about, the purpose and the why. Sometimes we don't always understand it. And as you said, sometimes it's about getting out and doing and just doing something. And then the purpose and the why will come, And I think when you then, and if you're lucky to actually then really hone in on that, that in itself can be life changing.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And so then, without opening it up again, but after that, you went on to run the London Marathon, which must have felt like a cakewalk after after 6 day marathons. You're like, this is easy. Anyone could do this.
Well, it's funny, you always think you're gonna do that, but actually they all have their challenges. But the marathon, have you ever done the London Marathon?
I have not. No.
Oh, do you know it? It's incredible.
Uh
It was
huh.
really incredible. I don't know if it's going to be something like the New York Marathon or it's one of the big five they talk about doing, and or maybe it's six, but the whole 26.2 miles was lined with people. It was just incredible, and you were running past some of the most iconic landmarks in London, and some places you weren't even, but people were out in the drums, they were um shouting at you, there's music, they were out with sweets, it was so well supported that no matter what, even if you're really tired, you thought, I better not stop because someone's going to see me, so you just keep going. But it's definitely a fantastic one to do for anyone, and even to do it for a charity. So I remember I got involved with MenCap, so I ran London for MenCap. And there is a little bit of a backstory actually, because when I came back from the Marathon des Sables, I just thought I could do anything. Work was busy, you were firefighting, but I just thought, right, okay, I'm going to focus. I'm going to do these ultra runs. I'm going to get a GFA, which is good for age. And I remember my coach, Rory, I'm still working with him. Um, he said, Ashton, do you know what? If you do Chester Marathon, because it's the deadline, and if you get a GFA time, you will get an automatic entry into London. I started laughing, going, I thought, okay, well, do you know what? I'll give it a go. I'll try. Anyway, I missed the GFA, but I'd already put my name forward for doing the marathon for charity. So I was very lucky to have got involved with MenCap. One of the beautiful things about involved with charity is you get to sort of find out what's happening in other people's lives in society. And as you say, it's about the world is much bigger than you. You are just this tiny speck, in this big world, and so much to learn. And yet, as a tiny speck, you play such a pivotal role in your life and in lives just immediately around you. So yeah, London, you definitely have to do London, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic.
You know what? I ran Boston, so I have that experience of just like the crowd carrying you, and there's no breaking because they would say keep going. I'm like, no, this is a planned planned break. They didn't understand, so it was a full 26.2 without stopping. But I can appreciate the crowd and the fans, and just like you said, we think we're small little pieces in the grand scheme of the world, but sometimes we're the student and sometimes we're the teacher and sometimes we're
Mhm.
helping people and they're helping us and we don't always know it, but I just think when you can bring that outside of the running or whatever activity, whatever physical activity you're doing that's bigger than you, and you bring it back into your everyday life, you're unstoppable, you're invincible. And I just think more people can do that. I'm not saying we need to go run marathons or we need to do what 22,000 people do in the Marathon des Sables, but what can we do? How can we just incorporate some physical movement, something to get us out of the day to day where we can create some contrast, some levity, some reflection, and see things for what they are? Because I think most of us, we spend time in the weeds and we don't stop or slow down to reveal what's actually going on. And when we don't know, we can't do anything about it.
You can't. It's like talking about, when you're talking about sort of movement and walking, sometimes in businesses, even going on and joining a course. It's like the business course I did recently, and you might think, you know what, I've no one else is going to be working on these patients, so and then I'm going to be paying the staff, and I can't afford to take that time off. And actually, what you've got to think about, and it's like mind that growth action plan, that gap. It's like it's really important to be courageous enough to take that time because that's investment in yourself. And not only invest in yourself, the more you invest in yourself, the more people around you are going to learn because you're going to have a broader perspective on what's happening. So even for me in the business, so you learn from working in the weeds and learning from your mistakes and the good points and the bad points and the crazy things that you do. But in fact, going to a course, it can help you see things in a different way. It can help you cement to go, oh God, I did do that right. Oh my goodness, I'm actually further on than I thought. That's very interesting. And you're listening and meeting other business owners and you're realizing you're not on your own. Other people are experiencing what you're doing, even though it could be in different industries. And I think that's really so important. And as you say, that's where you're the student. And then when I go back into my workplace now, from having learned from, and even from, I had a mentor in regards to sales and marketing, and having learned, she was incredible, even learning from Paula. Um, and I brought that back into my team. And so even, how I approach things with them is very different. So it's now coming from nearly like a mentor. You say, okay, well, what do you think about that? And how would you do that? And sort of trying to draw them out. And I think that creates a very different team then, because then you become a team of where you're not afraid to share. You're not afraid to maybe voice your concerns, whether something that you don't like. So I think it's now nice that my team will and say, look, Ashling, this situation's happened to you, or I'm doing this and I'm feeling there's a lot of pressure. Can we look at how we can reorganize that? And I go, yeah, okay, that's great. I actually thank you for bringing that to my attention because I didn't realize that was happening. So yeah, let's look at that. Let's get him, and I've talked to them and I go, okay, right, well, let's give this a go. And then if we think that's going to work, let's bring it to the team. Or sometimes I'll bring it to the team and say, right, look, anyone got any solutions? So it's been great from that point of view. You start to think that it's not all on you. Sometimes you nearly need to pass that bubble over and share it and get other people to collaborate, and then and then grow from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, from what I heard there, lot of wisdom there, but just the courage to say yes, to invest in ourselves, because you said we can't afford to sometimes, but I would say we can't afford not to, because what you've just mentioned there is, you know, when we're doing that, we're in community. And so often as entrepreneurs, it's nice to even just be a sounding board and know that what we're doing is we're not on our own or we're on the right path. But when we're sitting in our own, we go in our head. But also the culture you've created for your team by bringing back those learnings and now creating that psychological safety that's inviting them to give feedback. I mean, that's the best, that's when we go back to when we first started, that perspective. They're bringing a perspective that you haven't considered because you've created this safety and this openness to share. And that's all by you doing that yourself in a form of a community or a training, and so you're bringing that back. So I think that there's so many full circle moments here. It's just, we could keep going and going and going, but it's wonderful to see the connections and the ties from investing in ourselves and what they do to our audience and our surroundings, from whether it's sport, adventure, or just in learning, just I think it's the message here is step out and do something to better yourself. And don't be afraid of the hard things. Like hard things, we can do hard things, but like that's when that growth and that when you got to dig deep for it, oh man, like you're not the same person when you come out.
Oh, definitely not. And they're the best moments, and
Yeah.
then you think, oh my, and you look back, you just think, I really did do that. Um,
And you remember them. Like there's a pivotal, like I remember when I was running this one marathon in preparation for Boston, and I was training with a group of 3, and marathon, it's your own run, right? And so at one point it was I just felt inside there was this pivotal moment where I had to break away from the pack. It was just kind of getting too like, I'm like, this has got to be hard. It's not feeling
yeah.
hard. And I remember breaking away and I just mentally made the choice, like, I got to drop the shoe here. And I qualified and they didn't. And I remember just saying, like, I think at a certain point in life, your body tells you something like, if you're a type A person, like, I'm not here to settle, like I'm here for greatness. And I just knew that I had to drop it. And I think in life, how can we have that awareness to know my surroundings, my environment, something is no longer serving me. I don't know what I need to do, but I need to do something different and just act. And so for me, that was a run, but I'll always remember the time, the people, and that breakaway point, and that changed me forever. Like, and it put me on a different path. And I know that there's similar examples in business when I've done the same thing. And I think it all comes back to like betting on yourself, like wanting it and going for it.
And part of it, I mean, Greg, because that's amazing, because you really have to just go, right, okay, I'm gonna and not be afraid to go out on your own. Uh, and I think sometimes people are, as you're saying, you nearly need to tap into that and just go, right, look, I'm gonna go for this. Um, and be it type A or whatever, or be it a marathon, be it just reading books, be it just going for a walk, even just watching, making the time to like watch a movie with your child, because that's going to be transformative for both you and your child. So, all these things, I think it's looking at life, and it's maybe going, well, you know, what's working, what am I not so happy with? And not being afraid to be honest with yourself, because the more honest that you are with yourself, be it what you're potentially not, you're capable, but you're not pushing yourself. So just to get into that discomfort, and really go for it. Or, just where maybe, the pressure is there and you need to take your foot off the pedal, and not being afraid to actually take that time out, and recharge, because you can't, it's like some of the top athletes, and the professionals, they'll take time off between, like the boxers, when it's time out, they may be going on holiday for 6 weeks and they totally chill, totally relax. And then they come back and they're back to being, and to start again, and then they're back to being the best version of themselves. And I think in business, and people in general, not just in business, we're constantly going because we feel we have to be switched on all the time. But actually, we need to learn that no, that's physically impossible. Sometimes you need to have these outlets, be it running, be it a challenge, be it watching a movie, be it reading a book, be it taking yourself out of your business and going doing learning something, maybe learning a language, or that is very, very important for you to take that time out so that you actually can recharge and then be the best version of yourself.
I think I couldn't agree more. Just taking your foot off the gas, because I do feel, and it's probably social media does that too. We have that comparisonitis, and we have to keep, we're looking around and what are they doing, and I got to do more. But for me, a lot of my aha moments have come from taking a day off and just going for a walk or a hike, and something comes to me, because I think when you're pushing too hard and you're focusing on it, you're stunting your creativity, because you're kind of forcing it, and it's like sometimes it needs air and space to breathe.
Totally, totally, totally get that.
And one thing you mentioned, that people might be afraid to start anything, and I would agree. But I would say, even if you're afraid, like as long as you're more not afraid, so you could be like 55% and the rest can be fear. Because a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to be 100%. No one's ever 100% ready. And so I just think as long as the fear is the lesser component, but I just think recognizing there's still gonna be a little bit of fear, but you're still gonna go through it anyway. Because I think people then are like, "Well, I don't feel ready." You're never gonna feel ready, but you gotta just take that first step of whatever it is and go all in.
I used to always, to sometimes when you got the imposter syndrome when you go to do something, and then I would create a situation I where I couldn't take myself out of the situation. I suppose maybe I put a bit more pressure on myself to actually uh, do the challenge or do whatever it was I was going to do. And whether that was right or wrong, but actually now, because one of them was actually doing a parachute jump, and I tried on 3 attempts to do. So the first one, the wind was too high, or too strong. So, and it was just off the coast of Cornwall, and I was looking for it. I really wanted to sort of jump over the coast to see what it's like, because I believe I heard it was the most beautiful coastline, in all of England. And I thought, right, okay, I'll be in trouble for saying that. But and then I went a second time, but it was lashing rain. So then I just thought, okay, do you know what? I'm going to have to go more inland. So I then booked to go to Netheravon in Southampton, and it was a military base. I thought, well, military base, you know what, they're going to be organized. This is going to happen. And I remember going up in the plane. And it was a tandem, because I didn't have the courage to do it on my own, nor did I have the skills and the training. And the guy that I was going to be attached to, he was an army personnel, and he said, "Are you nervous?" I said, "No, no, I'm not nervous yet," and I didn't feel nervous. And genuinely, and I remember thinking, should I be feeling nervous? This is really strange. I've never had this before. And then he'd ask again, and I said, no, 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 I'm not. And even when the door was open, I just thought I was maybe going to really, really panic. I didn't panic at all. I think I got to the point where I just thought, I am doing this. I have waited so long to this is happening today. And we were like 15,000 feet, door opened. I had a photographer or cameraman there as well. And because the other two occasions I didn't have anyone with me. So I thought, well, I'm definitely going to get this recorded. This is a lifetime experience. So jumped out, and you know what? Even some people have said the first 3 seconds is just, with the air, you're trying to breathe and you panic. I was like, this is so exciting. Um, and and then it comes a point where it starts to calm down, and he pulls the parachute and you're lifted up, and then you basically are floating in the air. You're floating through clouds. I got to see Stonehenge from like 10,000 feet in the air. I mean, it was just incredible. And then you realize you have to land. But that all worked. Everything worked incredibly smoothly. And I remember thinking, gosh, and I think that was a pivotal point. I thought, have I put myself through so many different things? Because that was after Marathon Des Sables and other things that happened in the business, that I got to the point where I didn't fear jumping out of a plane. I just thought, I'm doing this. This is happening. And that was a very definite decision. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. And I think then, so is that a case that, as you were saying earlier on, the more you do and challenge yourself, it does become easier. You'll still have times though when you are really nervous and the imposter syndrome is there, but I think then you learn skills to manage, and keep pushing yourself forward.
That's amazing, and I just like, yeah, I couldn't agree more. When you have enough stacked under your belt, you're like, I've done it. Like the reps are there, the stats are stacking up now. But I think even what he said is, are you nervous? And I always reframe that as, are you excited? Because in the body, physiologically, it's the same symptoms, right? So I always say,
Yeah,
I'm excited. Sweaty palms, increased palpitations. It's all the same thing. It's a reframe. So I think yours is different in that you've done so many adventurous things and you've put yourself in those situations that there's also this sense of like, I've got this. Like I haven't died in any of the other things or injured myself, that like I'm okay to do that. So that's just a lesson I think that if anyone's listening, there is something about habit stacking that once you can stack these wins, all of a sudden your brain, which is goals to keep us safe and conserve energy, says like, you're good. I don't need to, raise the energy here or raise anything because you've got this. So it shows that, putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations, it does pay off.
It's like it's retraining. It's like or developing neural pathways,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think not people play it safe and they don't develop those new neural pathways. And the one thing they say is try brushing your teeth with your opposite hand, your left hand. That's creating that new neural pathway. And over time, it becomes less awkward. But it's trying something new. So listen, I just want to say you've opened my eyes. I'm gonna kind of get my creative juices back again because I was there and then life took over and it's no excuse. So you've been inspirational to me. I know the listeners have taken a lot from just turning things around, taking control of situations where you had a dark sad time. You took control. You made a choice. Like you had a decision at that point and you chose you, and then all the steps you took along the way to rebuild. But I also think there were so many teachers placed and guides in your path that from the folks in the tent, the dentist that you trained beside that was doing things that gave you these ideas, like they were placed in your path for a reason. There was no coincidence there. This is what I'm taking from it that allowed you to get to where you are today. Because I think when sometimes you look backwards, you're like, everything happened for a reason, and that was all meant to happen to allow me to be where I am today.
Absolutely. It's been, I suppose there you go. It's like the journey of a life and just being open to it. And thank you so much. It's been fabulous chatting to you. As I say, you inspire me with all the podcasts and the sales, and then from our initial meeting, I've learned so much and using that in my business as well. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. Well, listen, Ashling, if people want to get in touch with you, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So you can do it via LinkedIn under Ashling Lawler. And then I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So through the business is Ashling Lawler Dental Skin. Now that might change as a little bit of another chapter that's about to begin. Unfortunately, I was hoping I would be able to tell you a little bit more about that. But yes, there's another chapter unfolding, and another little while, another challenge. So yes, keep your eyes open. Um, but yes, so Ashley Noller Dental Skin on Instagram and the same on Facebook. And then we do have a YouTube channel, which I laugh about, actually, and our website. So yeah, loads of points of contact.
Well, they'll all be included in the show notes, and I will come by on my next visit to get some treatments done, maybe a little teeth whitening.
Perfect. Absolutely. I would love to have you in.
I will for sure. Whenever that is, we usually go back once a year, so I'll definitely let you know.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Love to see you.
All right, Ashling, thanks so much, and thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Karen, thank you so much. Bye now. See you, everybody.